The crisp October evening of September 30th, 1988, draped Central Park's great lawn in shadows that seemed to pulse with anticipation as 70,000 people filled every available inch of space for what had been billed as the most ambitious charity concert in New York City's history. The massive stage, constructed specifically for this one-night-only event benefiting homeless shelters across the 5 boroughs, rose from the earth like a monument to the power of music to unite people across generational, cultural, and stylistic boundaries that usually kept different communities of music lovers safely separated in their own familiar territories. The air itself seemed electric with possibility as the crowd's collective energy created a low rumble that vibrated through the park's ancient trees and mixed with the distant sounds of Manhattan traffic to create an urban symphony that served as prelude to the evening's unprecedented musical collaboration. Michael Jackson stood in the temporary backstage area that had been erected behind the stage, his sequined military jacket catching the harsh glare of work lights, while around him his production team made final adjustments to sound levels, choreography notes, and the complex technical systems that would need to function flawlessly to carry his performance to an audience larger than many small cities. This concert represented something different from his usual arena shows, not just because of the outdoor setting or the charitable purpose, but because tonight he would be sharing the stage with artists from completely different musical traditions, performers whose careers had shaped American popular music long before Michael had taken his first steps as a child performer with the Jackson 5. The evening's lineup had been carefully curated to represent the evolution of American popular music across multiple decades, from jazz standards through rhythm and blues, soul, pop, and contemporary dance music. Each performer was scheduled for a solo set that would showcase their individual artistry, but the evening's organizers had also planned several collaborative numbers that would demonstrate how different musical traditions could complement and enhance each other when brought together by artists willing to step outside their comfort zones and explore new possibilities for creative expression. But the collaboration that had generated the most curiosity and speculation among music critics and fans was the one that seemed most unlikely to work: a duet between Michael Jackson, the 30-year-old king of pop whose innovative dance moves and genre-blending compositions had redefined contemporary music, and Frank Sinatra, the 72-year-old chairman of the board whose sophisticated vocal style and mastery of American standards had made him one of the most influential performers of the 20th century. The two men represented not just different generations, but different philosophies of performance, different approaches to connecting with audiences, different understandings of what popular music could accomplish and how it should be presented. Frank Sinatra occupied his own temporary dressing room on the opposite side of the backstage area, surrounded by the kind of old-school show business professionals who had managed his career for decades. Men in perfectly tailored suits who spoke in the coded language of Vegas entertainment and understood that their job was to protect and present an icon whose reputation had been built on consistency, reliability, and the kind of effortless sophistication that made difficult things look easy. At 72, Sinatra remained a formidable performer, his voice perhaps not possessing the power of his younger years, but compensating with the kind of interpretive wisdom that only comes from decades of experience in translating lyrics into lived emotion. The idea for the Michael Jackson and Frank Sinatra duet had emerged during the initial planning meetings for the charity concert, when someone had suggested half-jokingly that the evening should include a performance that would demonstrate the continuity of American popular music by pairing its oldest active master with its youngest superstar. The suggestion had been dismissed initially as too risky, too likely to highlight the differences between the performers rather than their commonalities, too prone to create awkwardness rather than magic. But as planning progressed and both artists expressed genuine interest in the collaboration, the organizers had decided to take the risk, understanding that some of the most memorable moments in music history had emerged from unexpected pairings that initially seemed impossible. The song they had chosen for their duet was one that both artists had recorded previously but had never performed together, a classic American standard that had been part of Sinatra's repertoire for decades, and that Michael had recently reinterpreted in his own style for a special television appearance. The choice was strategic, allowing both performers to bring their individual strengths to material that was familiar to both, while creating space for improvisation and mutual discovery during the actual performance. As the evening progressed, and various artists took the stage to enthusiastic responses from the enormous crowd, the anticipation for the Jackson-Sinatra collaboration continued to build among audience members who understood they were about to witness something that might never happen again. The demographic diversity of the crowd was remarkable, with teenagers who had grown up with Michael's music standing next to middle-aged adults who remembered Sinatra's peak years, all united by curiosity about how these two masters of their respective crafts would find common ground on stage. Michael's solo set had been a triumph. His performance adapted perfectly for the outdoor setting and a massive audience. His choreography modified to ensure that even people standing hundreds of yards from the stage could follow his movements and feel connected to the performance. The crowd's response had been enthusiastic and appreciative, but as his set concluded and the time approached for the duet, a different kind of energy began to build in the crowd, a sense of anticipation mixed with uncertainty about what they were about to witness. Frank Sinatra's solo set had been equally successful, demonstrating that his command of an audience remained intact despite his age, his voice carrying clearly across the vast space, while his stage presence reminded everyone present why he had remained relevant across multiple decades of changing musical fashions. His selection of songs had been perfectly calculated to appeal to the diverse audience, mixing his most famous hits with lesser-known gems that showcased his interpretive abilities and his understanding of how lyrics could be transformed into storytelling. As both performers prepared for their joint appearance, the stage crew made rapid adjustments to accommodate a performance that would require different lighting, different sound mixing, and different staging than either artist's solo work. The challenge was technical as well as artistic. How to create an environment that would allow both performers to be heard clearly and seen effectively while maintaining the intimacy that great duets require, even when performed for enormous audiences. When Michael and Frank appeared together on stage, walking toward each other from opposite wings while the crowd erupted in appreciation that seemed to shake the very foundations of Manhattan, something magical began to happen even before they sang their first notes together. The visual contrast between them was striking. Michael in his contemporary performance costume moving with the fluid grace that had made him famous around the world. Frank in his classic tuxedo, carrying himself with a dignified bearing that had defined American entertainment sophistication for generations. But as they met at center stage and began their performance, the differences in their appearance and their background became irrelevant compared to the musical conversation they created together. Frank's interpretation of the lyrics provided emotional depth and storytelling sophistication that complemented Michael's rhythmic innovation and melodic creativity, while Michael's contemporary vocal techniques added fresh energy to material that might have seemed dated in less capable hands. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories about the moments when musical legends from different eras create magic together. What happened next was something that no one in the audience had expected, including the performers themselves. As the duet progressed, both artists began to modify their usual approaches to accommodate and enhance each other's strengths. Frank incorporating subtle rhythmic elements from Michael's style, while Michael adopted some of the phrasing techniques and emotional restraint that characterized Frank's interpretive method. The result was not a compromise between their different approaches, but a synthesis that created something entirely new, something that belonged fully to neither performer, but to the space between them, where different traditions could meet and create unprecedented possibilities. The crowd's response was unlike anything that had been heard in Central Park during previous concerts. Instead of the screaming enthusiasm that typically greeted popular performers, the 70,000 people present fell into a profound silence that spoke to their recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that transcended ordinary entertainment to become a moment of genuine artistic collaboration between masters of their respective crafts. The silence was not empty but full, charged with the kind of attention that audiences give only to performances that surprise them, that exceed their expectations, that demonstrate possibilities they had never imagined. People throughout the enormous crowd stood perfectly still, straining to hear every note, every word, every subtle interaction between the two voices that were creating harmony not just in sound, but in meaning, not just in melody, but in the bridging of generational and stylistic differences that had seemed insurmountable just minutes earlier. As the duet reached its climax, both performers seemed to transcend their individual limitations and tap into something larger than either could access alone. Frank's voice carried the wisdom of 7 decades of life experience, while Michael's added the energy and optimism of youth, creating a combination that spoke to universal themes of hope, resilience, and the power of art to create connections across any boundaries that might ordinarily separate people from different backgrounds, generations, or musical traditions. The final notes of their performance seemed to hang in the air above Central Park for an impossibly long time, sustained not by the performers, but by the collective breath of 70,000 people who were reluctant to let the moment end, who understood that they had witnessed something that could never be replicated or reproduced, something that existed only in this specific time and place with these specific performers and this specific audience. When the song finally concluded and both performers stood together at center stage, their hands clasped in mutual recognition and respect, the silence continued for several more seconds before giving way to an ovation that seemed to come not from individual voices, but from some deeper place where appreciation becomes reverence, where applause becomes prayer, where entertainment becomes transcendence. The ovation lasted for nearly 20 minutes, with people throughout the crowd unable to stop expressing their appreciation for what they had experienced, their understanding that they had been present for something that would be remembered and discussed for decades to come. Many audience members were crying openly, overwhelmed by the emotional impact of seeing two masters of their craft choose to honor each other's traditions while creating something entirely new together. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when both performers stepped to the edge of the stage, still holding hands, and simply stood there absorbing the energy and gratitude flowing toward them from 70,000 people who had been reminded of music's power to unite rather than divide, to create bridges rather than walls, to demonstrate that artistic excellence transcends all the artificial boundaries that too often keep people separated in their ordinary lives. In the days that followed, music critics struggled to find adequate language to describe what they had witnessed, ultimately concluding that some performances transcend analysis and can only be experienced, felt, and remembered. The duet was recorded by multiple television networks and radio stations, but everyone who had been present insisted that no recording could capture the full impact of being in Central Park that evening when two legends had chosen collaboration over competition and had created something beautiful together. For Michael, the collaboration represented validation from one of his most important influences, confirmation that his innovations in popular music were not departures from tradition, but extensions of it, not rejections of the past, but evolutionary developments that honored their roots while reaching toward new possibilities. Frank's willingness to explore contemporary musical elements while maintaining his own artistic integrity had shown Michael that growth and tradition could coexist, that respecting the past and embracing the future were not contradictory impulses, but complementary aspects of serious artistic development. For Frank, the duet had provided an opportunity to demonstrate that his artistry remained vital and relevant, that his understanding of song interpretation and audience connection could enhance and be enhanced by contemporary musical innovations. Working with Michael had reminded him of his own early career when he had been considered a revolutionary force in popular music, when his approach to singing and performing had challenged existing conventions and opened new possibilities for emotional expression through song. The 70,000 people who had been present carried the memory of that duet with them for the rest of their lives, many of them describing it as the moment they understood that great art transcends generational boundaries, that excellence recognizes excellence regardless of style or era, that the most powerful performances happen when artists choose to celebrate each other rather than compete with each other. Years later, When music historians look back on the evolution of American popular music in the late 20th century, they would identify that evening in Central Park as a crucial moment when the continuity of artistic tradition was made visible and audible, when the connections between different eras of musical innovation were demonstrated through live performance rather than academic analysis. The duet had proven that the best of contemporary music grew naturally from the best of traditional music, that innovation and tradition were partners rather than enemies in the ongoing development of American cultural expression. The silence that had fallen over Central Park during the duet became legendary among those who had experienced it, a reminder that sometimes the most appropriate response to transcendent art is not noise, but reverence, not screaming, but attention, not excitement, but awe. That silence had contained more appreciation than the loudest ovation, more recognition than the most enthusiastic cheers, more understanding than the most detailed critical analysis. The unlikely duet between Michael Jackson and Frank Sinatra on that October evening in 1988 had lasted only 7 minutes, but its impact would resonate for decades, proving that when artists of genuine quality choose to honor each other's traditions while remaining true to their own artistic visions, they can create moments of transcendence that remind audiences of music's power to heal divisions, bridge differences, and create unity out of diversity through the simple but revolutionary act of making beautiful sounds together in service of something larger than individual ego or commercial success.